I went over to Tom, I was like, this is why we need another project.
On that note, it's now 6 o'clock. Let's bring the CTAC meeting for April to order. Can we get a roll call?
Sure. Matt Rowe,
I'm here.
Brett Bierce,
Here.
Jennifer Combs, Patricia Incarnation, David McLaughlin, Nick Watnowski,
Here.
Joe Brito, Glenn Goldsmith,
The people online, it might kill you.
Glenn Goldsmith,
We're not muted, so you should be able to hear us.
okay, well, wait for confirmation, and Powell Buckar, James Powell, Jacob Clay, Micah Cunningham, Travis King, Jaron Hayes, Justin Chenault, Michael Hoyt, Kim Progue, Tamara Banks, Rupert Farley, Larry Gross, Dustin Savage, Rodney Thomas. There, we do have a quorum, but we do have some folks who said that they were attend remotely that did not speak up.
Is there anyone online right now who is a member of the CTAC who hasn't had a chance to sign it, to declare that they're in the meeting yet?
Yes, Glenn Goldsmith is here of representing Rock Hill, Stafford.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
This is Morgan
Hey,
Burke,
Jim.
Spotsylvania County. My name wasn't called, but I represent Spotsylvania.
Okay.
Huh.
And you said Dave just hopped on possibly?
Dave.
Dave, are you with us? Well, he's probably still in the process of signing in.
Yeah, I did.
Microphone set up. So do we have a quorum?
We do have quorum.
We have a quorum. Okay. All right. If anyone has had a chance to take a look at the agenda and feels confident in making a motion to approve the agenda, entertain that now.
I move to approve the agenda.
Motion by Mr. Bierce. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Approval of the CTAC meeting minutes from last month. If anyone has had a chance to take a look at the meeting minutes and would like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Sort of read.
All right, so moved. Is there a second? Second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great. Time for public comment. Comments and questions from members of the public are welcome at this time. Staff will also read comments submitted by the public prior to the meeting. Is there anybody in attendance that would like to say anything to the CTAC?
Yes.
Hi, hello.
Sorry, I'm late.
No worries. Is there anybody online that would like to make a public comment? Okay, do we have correspondence? Is it the one from Jane?
Yes, there's
Okay.
Jane and then Rupert's.
Right, okay.
Dollar.
Oh, please proceed.
Great. I'm gonna set myself a timer. 3 minutes. From Jane Leeds. Good evening. How can this body of people make informed and meaningful decisions about the needs of those who are physically and/or financially challenged without any awareness of understanding of what those challenges present? None of you use public transit on a regular basis that I am aware of. You probably have no idea of its limits and lack of safety for those who are trying to use it. Has anyone accepted my challenge to give up their car keys for a single week? You try to placate the disabled and in the end render your efforts meaningless because you didn't ask what or how it should be done. For instance, I am told the new VA clinic has all the latest and greatest of ADA sponsored needs for accessibility. That is fine, but it is only a destination. What about the points of origin, a critical piece of planning process? A good analogy is building a large and safe bridge over a river without any access to reach it. That is what sidewalks are to those who are physically challenged, but we don't have that in place. Most of our transit centers and bus stops are not safely accessible for many reasons. There are no audible signals, sidewalks, and too few buses with the equipment to accommodate us. The availability and accessibility of public transit is too limited to truly be truly meaningful and useful. For instance, if I want to attend this meeting using Fredericksburg Go, the bus schedule ends prior to the end of the meeting and I cannot use it to return home. Same goes for those folks who have jobs that require them to work later than the usual 9 to 5. Our bus routes cannot accommodate. In a recent planning committee meeting, a man spoke about public transit as a great thing, but in his next sentence said, but I don't use it as I drive where I need to go. Since he obviously does not use the system, how can he qualify that statement that transit is a great thing? Perhaps his limited view of the concept seems to exceed its ability to be meaningful to those who actually have it. The GWRC continually invites people with disabilities to their public meetings, but in the end dismisses our request to better access for the oft-repeated experience. There's no money for that. Congress earmarked money in the infrastructure bill of 2021 specifically for the disabled. Our nation's constitution states that all people should be treated equally in the pursuit of happiness. For the past 25 plus years, I have pursued that equality, but equality is not there for us as I worked, paid taxes, volunteered my time, talents, and money to my community for decades, but in the end, I can't even get a bus to bring me and take me home from this meeting. Think about that when you drive home this evening. What would your life be like without your ability to drive yourself to all the places you have to be to maintain your present quality of life? Thank you for listening. I hope this increases your awareness and understanding of what many of us are challenged to deal with every day, along with being disabled, poor, and/or aged. You or someone you love will meet one or more of these challenges someday sooner than you think. That's my 3 minutes. Thank you, Jane, for that public comment. And then we have a comment from Rupert Barley, a committee member who sent an email since he's not here tonight.
I might hold off on that, and maybe we should put that into the member report since it's a member of the committee and it's a public comment.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And just for anybody else that may have just come in, we're still in public comment. Is there anybody here that would like to make a public comment? Okay, just want to give the chance before we end the public comment period. There will be another one later. Moving on, item 6A, bylaw review. Can we get the bylaws on the big screen if possible, or does everyone have a copy that they have?
Just need a copy.
Let me know where.
No, that's perfect. It's in the officer section, section 2. I think it's just going to be section Article 3, Section 2. That's what we're trying to say. Yeah. So the one thing I want to bring up, I feel like when we come around this time every year or so, that there's question over what is the succession? Are there reappointments, anything like that? And then you might get situations where one jurisdiction is up and maybe there's only one person that wants to apply from the one jurisdiction while you have people from other jurisdictions that may also want to serve. So I had a couple suggestions to possibly clean this up a little bit and to add a little bit more predictability to how we would do this. So I have 2 thoughts on this just to bring up. We would not ever change the bylaws in a single meeting like this. I think this is good for discussion right now, and then we could hold a vote on something like this later if we decide to advance it. My suggestion would be that for the chairman, at least, should not serve more than 1 term. I think you serve 1 term and then you cycle off. You can serve a term later on if it comes back around to your jurisdiction, but I think that should just be 1 and done. No re-elections. We have plenty of people on the committee that can be given a chance to do this, and I think that they should have that opportunity.
The problem is sometimes there's no one willing to step up with David McLaughlin.
Right.
Then they repeat. So are you just
Yeah.
ruling that out as an option period?
So that's where the second part comes in.
Okay.
So we've had this question about the rotation. And I know that we had this issue a couple years ago where I believe the rotation at the time was Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, Stafford coming back to Fredericksburg. And then we didn't have anybody from Spotsylvania for a while. My suggestion to fix this and maybe to open the pool of applicants up a little bit is to simply say the next chair can be from a jurisdiction that the current chair is not from. So for instance, I'm from Fredericksburg. So in that situation, the next chair could come from Spotsylvania or Stafford. And say a Stafford person was elected. The next year after that, it could be somebody from Spotsylvania or Fredericksburg, just to give both localities that don't currently serve in the chair position the opportunity to stand in that position the next year around, instead of having a more rigid rotation that can possibly lead itself to getting it into these sort of stuck situations. Those were my two suggestions for that. I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts, or do you have any opinions on what I
I
said?
agree with Larry. I mean, how many people are on this committee total? What do we got? 33 members?
Right.
How many people are here today?
We do have 3 more online.
Okay, so we got 8.
4 now.
We get about
Okay,
for a full meeting.
yeah, so the problem isn't the chair position, the problem is participation. And anytime we limit things, I think it's going to create a problem in this situation. If we had, 5 people that wanted to be chair, that would be one thing, but we don't. I don't really particularly want to be chair myself. And is there anybody else here from Stafford? I guess you.
Well, if I understand it correctly, the current bylaws would require that if you were to not run for re-election, that the next chair would be from Spotsy.
Correct.
That's right, this next chair. would
Well,
have-
see,
From Stafford.
that's what I was a little confused about also, because the last few chairs have been Fredericksburg, Stafford, back to Fredericksburg because of the Spotsylvania, no one wanted to step up. In essence, I would sort of be saying that a bylaws change could almost codify that to be like, listen, you don't have to give every locality a chance. I would just say at least rotate it in such a way that no locality can have 2 consecutive chairs.
Well, and there's also a hitch there in that, and the last year's been a bit of a blur, and not to dig some wounds, but my recollection is that you succeeded upon the removal of the chair, and you did not have your own independent election. Is that correct?
That is true.
So, from my understanding, by reading the bylaws, the bylaws talk about elections. They do not talk about succession. And I don't believe there's such a limitation on the vice chairman in terms of rotation. Is that correct?
Well, it says that it should be that the chair
Yeah,
and the vice chair shall serve for 1 year to be reappointed for consecutive terms. So it's a 1 year from that date, so.
Oh, I see. Oh, so does that mean we technically don't have to, but no, this is.
Well, hold on. What's your question for a second?
When you talk about succession, he was his locality count because he was vice chair.
Well, that's part of the question.
Maybe this is what you get answered.
So the current bylaws were amended during the time of David McLaughlin's chairmanship, I think, or just before. And the reason was because nobody else wanted to be chair and the bylaws wouldn't allow for him to serve a second term. And there was just literally nobody who was prepared to be the chair. They begged people and everybody said no. So they quickly changed the bylaws. I'm not sure if it was before or after, but anyway, they changed the bylaws to allow this clause unless the chairman is elected for a second term. The trouble with the amendment was that it never set an endpoint, so the chairman could be chairman for life.
Yeah, reading this.
So that's the weakness of that amendment. It was done in a bit of a hurry because of a special circumstance, which was a real problem. It wasn't an imagined problem. They had a real problem, but it unfortunately created this clause which just goes on and on forever, that the same person could effectively be re-elected every year again and again and again. And the general principle has been on all FAMPO committees that it should rotate. Because you don't represent yourself, you represent a jurisdiction. And so there's this feeling that to keep the peace at FAMPO, you want the chairmanships of all of our committees to keep rotating so that it doesn't become entrenched in one jurisdiction always being in charge of a committee, right? What you're doing now is saying, we don't like the way it's ended up, so let's try to fix that. So what you're trying to do is fix a thing that was done in a hurry because of a particular circumstance, which I think is a good thing. I haven't talked to anybody here about this, but I think it's a good thing to do to actually revisit that amendment, because it was maybe too kind of loose and fast the way it was brought about, and maybe you need to think, now that you've got time and there's no particular crisis,
Right.
you can think a little bit more carefully about what likely will occur in the future and can reword that thing.
And that was my thought there, where in Dave's situation, there was no one from Spotsylvania that wanted to serve after his term was over. Whereas my suggestion for this was, in that given scenario, it could have been opened up to Spotsylvania and Stafford.
Yeah.
So just to say that it's not, you don't have the same jurisdiction consecutively going back to back to back to back.
What if,
Possibly.
and I have a tendency to overcomplicate things, so let me know if this is the case. What if we codify that and create a right of refusal? Meaning, if the next successive jurisdiction unanimously votes to not be chair, that opens it up to the other jurisdiction.
I think that's like, I get that. I think that's tough if you have, say, a single person from the next up jurisdiction who maybe, what if that committee doesn't really want to go with that person, but because they're the only person from the jurisdiction willing to step up, you're kind of trapped in that situation.
That's why I'm vice chair right now. But so I'm sympathetic to that. But I just think I think there is a way we can have it so that it's, for example, Stafford, Fredericksburg, Spotsy, Stafford, Fredericksburg, Spotsy. But if Spotsy being the next jurisdiction, no one from Spotsy wants to step up, can we codify that so that they get right of first refusal? Because it should be Spotsy next. But they're also not required to chair when they don't want to.
Right. No, I get where you're coming from, just because, if no one wants to do it, just let the next look do it. I just think that, again, just to go back to what I said, like, I'm worried that there might be one single person that no one really wants to go with, and then you're kind of trapped.
Oh, I see.
Because if it's not unanimous, and one person's like, oh, I want to do it, and everybody's like, okay, and then you're kind of trapped in that situation.
So
Sure.
in that scenario, what happens if nobody from no county wants to do it?
Well, that's,
Does that mean,
yeah.
And nobody does, so does that mean FAMPO has now no chair until someone wants to step up? Or do we just, just everybody from every jurisdiction, say, this is the person we want to represent us, and then we have an election? Because from what I see, nobody wants to do it.
Which sounds
We
like,
gotta get the localities to start appointing super ambitious people.
well, it sounds like the solution here is almost a parliamentary system where we have party leaders from each delegation who form a coalition government of some sort.
To the public.
Yeah.
Vice chair does not automatically become the chair.
No, only if the chair were to vanish or whatever. Yeah.
That never happens.
No.
Happened last year.
I think ours was originally modeled after the policy committee, and they're not shy there about succession.
Right.
In fact, it's politically causes a problem if they don't follow succession.
Right. And there it's definitely a lot more tribal, where it's, it's very much, these are Stafford priorities or Spotsylvania priorities, Fredericksburg priorities. Here, like, yeah, maybe we feel certain ways about our localities, but we don't come into this thinking like, I'm bringing Fredericksburg flag into a battle or something,
But we should bring our flags.
Can I ask if the technical committee follows that succession?
Yes, it does.
So this is the only one that we have this issue with, really.
I mean, The town can actually have, because it's employee driven based on the locality, it can actually run into an issue where you might not have an employee representing that would be up. So, I mean, you can actually have that kind of problem even at the TAC level. It's just not as common.
So my question, though, if we're perfectly honest, the teeth that CTAC has are non-existent. And so does succession matter as much in our body?
Not really. I mean, it's just an advisory committee, you know, that we're not driving policy. We're just making recommendations, providing advice. But yeah, I don't think it's the train.
I'm not,
That was,
Who's speaking?
Um,
Who's speaking?
that was Morgan Birch,
Yeah.
who used to represent Stafford and is now representing Spotsylvania.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't see the need for succession. It looks like it causes problems.
Yeah, I mean,
Why not just have people sign up to run for it, election wise?
So just get rid of the county, city.
That's the idea. I don't know.
is there,
I think it should be first priority if, that the other, localities can chair. From there, it has to be, you know, if nobody wants to chair, then it has to move on to the vote, you know.
Well, I guess it hasn't. I don't know if we're going to end up in a situation. I don't know how likely to have one locality end up being the chair of this ad nauseum. So maybe the succession part of that really doesn't play into it at all. And, you know, you could still have a 1-year limit on the chairmanship, throw it open to every single person on the committee, and then just let the chips fall. And whoever wins that election wins the election, regardless of where they're from.
my question then is that's a dramatic change in the bylaws. Are we empowered to make such a change?
Like,
We don't have a lot of people here today.
Yeah, without a quorum, yeah.
Yeah, I brought this up last year. You know, Ian, you might recall this because you were involved in those chains. It was talking about when you restrict it to specific, when you omit the ability for a currently for a locality that currently has a chair sitting there to be able to run, then you take away the ability for the body to choose from all available candidates, which would be all other folks that are in, for example, Fredericksburg, right? When if Matt's time comes up, we still can't elect somebody else from that locality. It really shouldn't matter which locality somebody is coming from to take that seat. It's extremely limiting the way that it's currently written.
And the reality is that, you know, not everyone from the same locality has the same priorities. With my fellow Stafford people, I'm sure we all have different priorities in terms of what we want to see happen.
yeah, but you know, just because the chair may be from one locality doesn't mean that members can't be empowered to bring up particular issues. And I always encourage people to bring up issues and bring it forward to the CTAC. I don't know. I for some reason, and I don't know if this is just my personal feelings on it, is that to me, I feel like having a rotation perspective is more important than the rigid, we followed this, you know, order when it comes to locality. So I still feel like it would be great to have a 1-year limit on the chairmanship with no re-election possibilities. And maybe that makes it a bit easier if you have the entirety of the CTAC as your pool of candidates going into the next election.
See, that's where I'm going to disagree with you a little
Okay.
bit. And I would say that because, and the reason I disagree slightly is because if we're in the middle of something, because this does set election date as June, right?
I wasn't sure about that because, like, it's 1 year, but I guess it's.
Well, no, I just read it.
Okay. I'm fine with it being June.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, so
I
what
wasn't
I'm
sure
sure is that with a set date, if we're in the middle of some sort of initiative where a chair is pushing that, I think there's an argument for reelection in those circumstances. So maybe the argument could be a limitation on terms. Because you're right, the language right now does not seem to have a limitation on how many terms. It sounds like we could have them in the CTAC, which would be kind of an odd idea, but at least the trains would run on time. But so maybe term limits that are, I would argue that there's a purpose for reelection, but there's also is a purpose for limit.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Would you, in that scenario, open it up to anybody to run for election afterwards, regardless of locality?
If there's after the end of a term of a 2-term chair, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. What does anybody else think? Or are we just kind of,
Well, I'm not sure what the other gentleman was talking. I don't know who was speaking over on the left side of the table, or the right side. So I'm not sure what the point was regarding if there was an initiative. I just wasn't understanding it. If there was an initiative on the table and the chair could drive it in a direction, that the chair on this advisory committee has no more pull than any other member. Any member can bring any agenda item to the agenda that they want to. The chair just exercises Robert's Rules of Order and drives the meeting itself. That's really the only job the chair has.
Okay.
This is Glenn. I agree with Morgan, and I also have another question. So based off the way it's reading here, the nomination and election of officers will be in June. If we were to go the latter way, then of course we would have to change that actual characteristic too as well. Will be in June, based on what the other gentleman said a moment ago, with regard to if the chair is trying to drive a particular agenda, which again I support Morgan because that's not what I don't think we're supposed to be doing. Then that would change that actual part of the sentence too. Correct? Will be in June.
Right. I will say that if you're a chair and you wait till the last month of your term to start driving an agenda, that's probably bad chairmanship. But
Right.
Look, those are just thoughts I had. I'm not.
No, everybody's bringing up good points. All right. Does anyone feel strongly about anything one way or the other about making any sort of change? We would not vote on any changes this meeting. That would be bad policy when it comes to bylaws. We could make discussions, and then we could put forward a bylaws change to be voted on at the next meeting. We would just decide what change we want to propose and then vote on it next time. Does anyone feel strongly one way or another to propose a change?
I would think,
Just
I
for
would
clarity,
say-
just for
Go ahead,
clarity and understanding, what is the purpose of driving this change at this time? Just to be clear.
Just because we've had issues in the past when it comes to around election time, it's like, okay, so what happens if no one from this county can or wants to serve? What do we do? Are there re-elections? What do you do if you only have one person from one locality that wants to serve? It's the same questions that we have, it feels like every time that this comes around. And I was just hoping to possibly loosen things up and clarify things so that there's a little bit more leeway as to what the committee can do.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would say from my perspective, and this is just my opinion, for Section 2, like Mr. Ollis had stated, it was hastily added in. Remove the ambiguity about unless successively appointed, because it really doesn't make any sense whenever it talks about the turnover of the chair seat, and then eliminate the restriction by locale and only have the restriction by individual.
So was that suggestion for, let me just clarify this, and then I think Ian had a comment too. So was that to loosen it up for the locality so that anybody from any locality can run for chair, regardless of who served as chair previously? Would you, and you're saying get rid of the opportunity to re-elect or reappoint someone?
Yes.
Okay. Ian?
To answer the previous gentleman's question, there is a good reason to change this, and that is because your current bylaws do not have an end point. Somebody can serve for life. And that was an oversight when the amendment was brought, the first amendment that was brought to change this. They never thought about the fact that, I mean, they didn't write into the new clause a terminus ad quem, an end point. Like, nobody should be a chairman of anything for life. It's never a good idea, right? So that's the motivating reason. I mean, I wasn't aware you would, I hadn't realized we were discussing this tonight. But if you need a reason to make an amendment, that's the good reason. Is that there's just no end point. It could just go on forever, and that's not a good idea. It's not very democratic, because what happens is somebody becomes entrenched, and then everybody has to literally fight a war to get them out because they've now entrenched. You know, they're like the Godfather. They were there when you joined the committee, and to now oppose them is quite hard. So it's better to have a term limit, and there isn't a term limit anymore since the amendment.
Yeah, and I know that there's a lot of people that might not want to serve, but we do have a lot of bright people on this committee that could do this if they so chose to. And giving them the opportunity, I think, is good.
I agree.
So Morgan, do you want to make a motion to that?
I think we should, the best path forward for this is to get the texts, clear text in front of membership over the next month, muddled over, and then bring it up for a vote at the next meeting.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, maybe have some options.
Yeah, and then we can vote for it in June when we have the text in May. If we so choose to.
Who's going to write the text?
I'll do it, track changes, and work with chair on that.
Okay,
So you'll see it crossed out in text.
okay.
So
Well, I don't think we need a vote on that then, because we're just putting words together, and then we can vote on that. Next time, we could just vote on whether the verbiage is correct and then actually have the vote in June. Because again, I think the right thing to do is to give everyone one solid month in between meetings to take a look at something before you actually.
Meeting in July, so they.
Right, so, and then we have
elections.
We have elections in June, but I guess if we put the bylaws into place at the beginning of the meeting, then.
Yeah, put the bylaws prior and above the election in the agenda, then there's no problem.
Yeah, then there's not a problem there. Just for everybody's situational awareness, if there was a scenario in which I was going to run for re-election, I'm not going to. So there will be a new chair elected at the June meeting. Just to clear that up. Well, hopefully that's the case. Hopefully someone puts their name forward.
Where does it rotate to?
Well, if we do approve the bylaws changes, it wouldn't rotate to anyone in particular. It could be anybody from any locality.
Under the current rules, however, it would rotate to Spotsylvania.
Yeah, and there's nothing against Spotsylvania. Just last time around, Spotsylvania didn't have anybody that wanted to serve, and then it gets muddled with this. This way, it's just a little bit looser, and then if this doesn't work out, we can always change the bylaws later.
One last question.
Yeah, sure.
I'm looking at the last line. Why Caroline County and King George cannot serve as
service officers
Right.
and at large.
Well, I'm at large, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. But why can't they?
Technically, King George and Caroline County are not members of FAMPO. Only has 3 jurisdictions that are members of FAMPO, and that is Spotsylvania, Stafford, and the city of Fredericksburg. There's been discussion in the past, in fact recently as well, of other jurisdictions joining FAMPO, but that hasn't happened. And so currently there are only 3 jurisdictions who are currently members of FAMPO. We always invite Caroline and King George to participate out of it. So for example, on the CTAC, we have a member from each of those jurisdictions, from King George and from Caroline County, because we want participation. But they are never elected chairs of the FAMPO committees because they're not member jurisdictions of FAMPO. They are members, full members of the George Washington Regional Commission. So GWRC has got 5 jurisdictions, FAMPO only has 3.
Sometimes we'll ask about at-large members, because I'm sure I'm not the only at-large member.
Say again,
And the at-large members,
what about them?
why aren't they allowed to be, officers?
So all the so all the representatives by the jurisdictions are appointed by their county or cities, elected officials. At-large folks are appointed by our policy committee. So basically, it's kind of a slightly different skew. So Fredericksburg and Stafford are also having an input if they're selecting somebody from Spotsylvania at an at-large versus if it was just a Spotsylvania person, Spotsylvania elected officials are choosing them for their representatives to the seat. So they kind of serve at the behest of their elected officials.
And so how long is the at-large member? Because I've been asking about that. Do I have to go back to the policy committee? Because I didn't see that.
I believe the terms for at-large members on our committees are 2 years.
So,
If that's the case, then there should be a request to renew your membership as an at-large. We'll deal with that administratively.
okay.
Can we get a list of, all the members and, where they're appointed from?
Chairman, the membership list is on the website, and we indicate the jurisdictions of each member on the website. So it's available now, if you spot the website.
Yeah.
There you go.
Is that current?
We update it every time somebody formally resigns, or every time somebody is formally appointed. We've found, though, that not everybody participates as vigorously as perhaps they should, but the list we have on the website is according to our records up to date. In theory, if somebody doesn't attend for many meetings in a row, their jurisdiction should discuss that with them and possibly replace them with somebody else.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions on that? Okay, I think we can move on to the next agenda item. 6B, preemptive capacity and thoughts for CTAC.
Okay, so this was brought up as a request for the committee to kind of have. I'm trying to remember the email now so I get it accurate, but I'm kind of also just spacing out there as well. To kind of have, yeah. Basically was have an idea of kind of positions and viewpoints kind of collectively held by CTAC to approach topics as they come up. So it's literally, it's like, is there any preemptive capacity available? And this is somewhat in response to the Transportation Authority that kind of came up as a surprise, but at the same time, that if it comes up as a surprise, how the preemptive capacity might be a little bit difficult. So that was just brought up as a discussion item, or really if the committee had any preferences on that, as whether or not they, if the committee should have a position. I think this was it, is David on the?
It was me.
Was you? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So go please.
So we had the conversation, I want to say, was it February? When did we, when did we talk about the legislation about having, oh, I forget the wording, and I'm spacing too.
Regional Transportation.
Regional Transportation Authority.
Yeah, I think we talked about that February meeting because it was
February meeting?
between the January and February meeting. It was proposed and tabled.
Yes. So my thinking on that was, you said at the time that part of the reason it was tabled, maybe not part of the reason, but something that happened was we did not have an ingoing position on that. So I guess my reason for putting this on the agenda today is, could we have, and I don't think we're going to take a big consideration today, but could we have somehow a list of potential things that, like a regional transportation authority, and then hopefully including regional transportation authority, because there's another legislative session in January, and I think having this conversation in April gives us plenty of time to prepare, that we might want to prepare for should the question come up. Does that make sense?
So you want a list?
A list or other sort of structures, because I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know enough about the policy side to say, oh, well, we need to be ready in case they ask us this, and this. But maybe from someone who knows more, can we have something where, you know, if the legislature says, hey, we're considering this, they say, well, the CTAC says this.
So, I mean, the difficulty with that is that there could potentially be a long list or nothing on the list. Because on the one hand, what do you put on the list and what do you not put on the list? With regards to the Regional Transportation Authority, I am working with Policy Committee to answer that question. So we have spoken at the George Washington Regional Commission's board meeting about possibly getting a joint subcommittee or working group between GWRC and FAMPO to talk about this issue before the next legislative session so that we have a joint position. And I made it very clear that I think it's our responsibility as organizations to discuss this issue and to come up with whatever it is that we think should be done. I don't get a vote, but you know, the board. And I think that there is interest. King George, I said FAMPO should discuss it, and one of the representatives from King George on the George Washington Regional Commission said, no, we also want to be included in that discussion. So I think there's some interest in having the discussion, and I'm hoping that probably the June Policy Committee will formally appoint a working group or subcommittee or something to meet also with GWRC's folks from King George and Caroline County to through the summer have discussions about, I'm going to call it funding options rather than specifically a regional transportation authority. But that issue will be boiled into that. Now, I don't know if they decide to do that. It's going to be my personal suggestion to the policy committee to do that. They know it's coming because I've mentioned it a number of times. And I'm just, you know, trying to do it systematically so that we have can we agree we need to have this discussion? Yes, we decide we need to have a discussion. Okay, let's have at least one person from each jurisdiction at a meeting, a workshop, or whatever we're going to call it, and have that sometime during the summer. So that by the time our committees are going in the fall, we decided on the process of how we're going to decide, and then we start that process to actually make a decision so that by the time we get to November, December, when new proposals start getting put on the table by people running for office, we know what our response is going to be so that we're not caught in that difficult situation where, oh, here's a thing, we're voting on it next week, right? We don't have that. And I think that certainly members from Stafford have said that they think we should have that discussion. Members from King George have said they think we should have that discussion. So I think there's some interest in having that discussion and coming to a position. And so I think that solve this current one. It's difficult to anticipate what the legislature in Virginia and Richmond are going to come up with, right? Those politicians, there's an endless list of things they can come up with, and it's difficult to preempt them. The reason why this one I think we can deal with is because it's come up now 3 times. 3 times in Richmond, they've decided they want to do this without consulting us. And it's our region. So we feel now, hey, it's about time that we got our own position straight so that the next guy or lady that comes along and says, hey, we want to do this for you, we're like, not so fast. Here are our 5 points if you want to do this. This is what we think about any proposal to do this, and we can share that publicly. So I think we'll have an answer on this one. I'm just not sure about a list. If this committee was to come up with a list, that's great. But I don't have one to give you because I'm difficult at other people are going to come up.
Potentially give an example. from a committee that I was on in a different jurisdiction is when Vision Zero was still kind of a new, it's a safety kind of targeted towards zero deaths. Our committee took a position on it well before any of the elected officials did. So basically, as you know, staff or whatnot, it started gaining traction. It was already basically a kind of a, yes, we accept it. We do have some caveats and some issues, but we supportive that, you know, should a jurisdiction want to explore this, we recommend that they do it and then come back and have a conversation with us. So that was kind of something that did, because I think we took that position a couple of years before the jurisdiction adopted a formal Vision Zero policy, but that would be something that the committee would have to acknowledge as an issue that they want to say, no, we definitely want to pursue that.
So how did your committee become aware of that ahead of time?
Trying to think, we had at least one committee member who was very much a safety advocate for the community. And so they were like, hey, this is gaining traction. I think it started off in the Northeast. They were from that jurisdiction or from that area originally. So they're like, okay, we need to look at this and then also start advocating our elected officials to start looking at it as well.
There are two, Mr. Chairman, there are two things which are mentioned in the new federal laws, like the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. Linda there from VDOT will tell you that we've had to add to our UPWP a long list of new ideas, which we have to embrace. But the law doesn't tell us how to implement those things. It just says, hey, you should be considering these things, and there's a list. So things like complete streets, which is this idea that certain streets should have facilities for all modes of transportation. So bicycles, pedestrians, buses, transit, cars, everything on a street, right? Now you can't put that on every street for space reasons, right? So what's a good policy to deal with that? Well, we don't have one. Most people don't have one. So if this committee wants to start thinking about that, that's something you can think of in advance, because we haven't got there yet. We're not sure exactly how to implement it, and there's various views. Second one is transit-oriented development. This idea that you put high, dense developments near big transit infrastructure, and so you create this node with sidewalks, bike paths, bus stops, train stations, all in one local vicinity, and then you allow density there. You allow more taller buildings, more units per mile, or whatever the case is, so that you create these nodes, right? But we don't have a policy as FAMPO, and our jurisdictions don't really have a policy. It's an idea that we've started floating. It's in these new federal regulations that we should consider this. But how? Where? I mean, that's a policy you should think about. I don't know, Susan, Linda probably got some further suggestions.
And federal highway hands down guidance and regulations, but it always takes a year or two, year minimum, but usually a couple of years. But it sounds like what you recommending are decision statements from the citizens group, where, again, I think time would be better spent looking at what's in the new law, because it's huge, and then keeping abreast through different services that are available, or maybe somebody on staff, as to what the CTB or the state legislature is planning to look at. But that all moves really quickly once they're in session, so kind of almost have to have an in-person to understand what their priorities are, because you're not allowed to lobby, but you know people that are, and it'd be nice to know sort of what they're pushing.
What we could do, and Don would be the person to start here, is to around about January, once we've got a list of all the new legislation that's proposed. The session in Virginia is short. It starts in January and it's over by like
End of January, isn't it? Oh, no.
it's about 6 to 8 weeks.
They have a
right?
60-day session next week.
Yeah, so 60 days. So the beginning of the 60 days, we can give you a list from the internet of all the bills that are coming up, and we could extract from those the transportation ones. Because it's not usually 100 transportation ones, it's usually like 3 or 4.
Well,
And
they only have to be Fredericksburg related. You know, I don't really care. Like, we don't need to say anything about what's going on in Hampton Roads or.
You better watch it, because
You
you
might
might have
wanna watch.
funding that goes over there.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is that they pre-file bills as early as November and December. So yeah, so we can know stuff even before the next General Assembly session starts.
So I guess my proposal then is the idea that we compile a list of things we will need to consider in January and start that compilation as soon as possible. So that come January, it's on the agenda, we consider, hey, here's what we think about this. And then my follow-up question and follow-up thought there is, what roles CTAC can play in that?
Well, you could certainly express an opinion.
Yeah.
And as I understand the bylaws of FAMPO, the position of the role of CTAC is to inform, lobby, suggest to the policy committee positions they should take. So you might have thought through it and discussed it with the public and say, hey, we need a bike path on this street, right? So then you write a letter or you send your chairman or your vice chair to the policy committee to say, chairman of policy committee, we have a suggestion from CTAC, which is this. We think we need this bike path or whatever the thing is. So I think that your role is to advise and assist the policy committee to A, know what's going on in the community, and B, come up with proposals that the policy committee can vote on, right, to make a decision. Sometimes they'll vote yes, sometimes they'll vote no, sometimes they'll say, let's think about it a bit longer or whatever. I mean, that's up to politicians, but I mean, that's a function, a key function of the CTAC is to provide suggestions to the policy committee of positions they should take. So when there's a thing coming up on bicycles, I'm just picking on this example. You guys discuss it, come up with a suggestion, then you send somebody to the policy committee, or you all go if you like, and make the point to the policy committee. Hey, we've talked about this. We think this is a good idea.
So do we want to take action on compiling a list then of things to consider in January?
Sure. I don't think we need a motion to that effect or
Do
anything.
we?
Yeah. I think you could just make a list.
Yeah, I'm sort of thinking this is the argument that this is not a FAMPO staff role for them to bird dog the General Assembly and to advise all three committees of what's going on. In other words, I want to have someone that's doing this for sure and not someone that's sitting on a committee that might do it. And I don't know, that's my argument.
Staff traditionally provide legislative updates to its committees. That's not unusual.
And staff would compile a legislative agenda if they would want to.
So we can give you, Mr. Chairman, the list of items that come in November and December in the state legislature and give you a list of proposed bills that are on your January meeting. We can do that for you, absolutely. If you want ideas that might occur that are outside of that list, then you need to give us more guidance as to what you want.
Well, that's what I was actually going to suggest is that, we were appointed by our localities to serve on the CTAC. So, the idea is that we do care about transportation policy and we are attuned to what's happening in our jurisdictions. So I think that CTAC members themselves could also pay attention to what's happening locally and to maybe add to that list as well.
Now, so I guess my question then is what medium could that list take? Can we, what could we?
Excel spreadsheet.
Well, yes, but I mean, to comply with FOIA, would we need to publish that in some way, or?
It'll be provided on the agenda.
Yeah, a link in the agenda.
Okay. Yeah, we added to your January agenda. Here's a list of pieces of legislation that have been submitted to the legislature in Virginia. Right. And here's the list. We give it to you on your agenda for the January meeting. Okay.
Sounds good to me.
All right. If anybody has no objection or further discussion on that, we can just move forward on that. All right. Great. 6C, safety metrics and performance assessment.
Okay. I'll give a quick update because for the safety targets as well as the asset condition targets, these were both items that were brought before the policy committee in their last meeting to be adopted. So these are two items that the federal government requires MPOs to at least coordinate on. Normally, this is the adoption of safety targets in coordination with the DOT, their state DOT, VDOT in this case, to adopt these targets. So, and I would say almost all cases, and I'll get to why it's almost all cases, traditionally these targets are set by the state DOT, and then MPOs follow suit. The feds do always offer the options that MPOs can develop their own. The trick is that unless you're a Washington DC size MPO, traditionally you don't have the staff or capacity to develop these targets because they are rigorous and the feds have fairly significant standards that you have to meet and prove that these are targets that are appropriately decided upon. So for MPOs our size, we coordinate with VDOT. They provide the state targets. They kind of break it down to our region to say, okay, this is kind of the area where the targets need to be. And therefore, we approve these through our kind of process with the policy committee so that we're in compliance with the feds, because they say it's a mandate that basically says the localities through the MPO have to coordinate with the state DOT to make sure that you're talking on both your safety targets and asset conditions. So in the previous meeting, they have accepted the targets that you see there on the right. Probably most notable is that that for the fatality targets actually increase. Traditionally, these are built on 5-year rolling averages, so previous 5 years. And with 2020 having a very large spike in fatalities that's kind of continued on and trailed on. Since then, you're actually seeing our 5-year rolling average kind of being reflected into this. So we are seeing that, but we're also seeing a target of a decline in serious injuries, as well as a decline in non-motorized fatalities. This is also addressing that currently right now, the vehicle miles traveled is also increasing. And for these target descriptions, they're also based on 100 million miles traveled. If you break that into just a basic average of how many, the average person drives 15,000 miles a year, you actually get into a rate of, it's about a fatality for every just under 9,000 individuals, as well as serious injury for 1 in about, I think, 42, or a crash for 1 in 42. So these are the targets that VDOT provided and that the FAMPO policy committee adopted. If you can go to the asset conditions, next slide. In kind of the same process, again, this is something that we have to work in for compliance with the federal government to make sure that we're coordinated with our state DOT. As far as kind of saying, okay, what is the appropriate level of repair? And you can see kind of the breakdown depending on kind of the road classifications, road structure types, the amount of congestion that is considered to be a reasonable level target. And so these were the targets that were set for that the policy committee also updated.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
So I see that in some of these you have, like for instance, the top one, percentage of pavement in good condition and poor condition. But
Yes.
what are the other 52%? What are the other
I
categories? for
believe that would be excellent and fair condition.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think if there's one that's below 4. I'm not 100% positive that if there is one.
Okay.
So yeah, they basically say this is what should be good. This is what anything that's worse should be. But if it's in that fair condition, they kind of like, let's
Okay.
worry about that a little bit.
Obviously, that doesn't pertain to Stafford. I think that,
The FAMPO region.
Yes.
So you're adopting state level targets and then putting them in FAMPO.
Yes.
So for our region.
So it's FAMPO tailored based off the state targets. So it's not just that it's the statewide that is all that. It's the state is saying that our region should attain. Yes.
These are for the FAMPO region. These are specific.
Correct. So those were where it was approved the standard boilerplate. Even something like with adopting the state, I've done this in other NPOs. It's fairly straightforward. If you're a small, medium, and even a large NPO, it's really the only changes usually happen on the very large ones where they have the staffing capacity if they choose to deviate from the state targets.
You know what the numbers are now?
Oh, not right off the top of my head.
Right.
So generally it's actually a little bit lower. These are typically goals where they're trying to improve. I would expect, you know, poor and good condition to probably be slightly higher than that for the poor, slightly a little bit lower. It's usually a target to try to attain. So
Your VDOT member sitting behind you might be able to find it out for you.
Finding it out, I can't, so I don't know it off the top of my head.
yeah. Okay, well, that will segue into our next section, which
All right.
is the VDOT, VHB, FAMPO Transportation Safety Study. This has also been going along. So this is actually a different process than the statewide targets. That's kind of a requirement. This is a study that's going on that's actually slowly being built in and filtering into our Safe Streets for All grant program. So we're actually accomplishing a couple of different steps at the same time preemptively. And looking at the factors that are going into some of our safety concerns within the region. So if we look across the state at other NPOs, from a safety point of view, the Fredericksburg area is actually doing relatively well. Crashes per 100 VMTs is relatively low, which is, I mean, Northern Virginia is doing a little bit better than we are, as well as Bristol, but on a grand scheme of things, we're sitting pretty well, as well as the number of fatal crashes per VMT. 100 million VMTs, which breaks down to about 9,000 drivers per driver. So we're doing good. And of course, the other trick is that congestion actually plays a really big role into this. So often what you see with some of these comparisons is areas that have higher congestion also have lower crashes and fatal crashes as well.
You found the silver lining.
Yeah, I know. I was like, there's always one good thing about congestion. So, but you're seeing some of that. Yeah.
We as planners speak a lot in planning technical terminology, and we use abbreviations and we use all sorts of things. Does everybody know what these terms of BMT and things like that mean?
Vehicle miles traveled.
Yeah, but do the committee members all know that? Because it
Well,
does.
I've been working it in. But yeah.
To remind you, if you're still on the committee, you don't know what a term means, that's normal. We don't expect everybody to know what these things mean. Just put up your hand and say, hey, what's BMT? And John will tell you.
Yeah, I can't tell you what VHB, that consultant group's name, actually stands for, so it's okay.
Is there a list of all of them defined?
Yes.
Yeah.
There is a glossary. Yeah, we do have a glossary. An acronym glossary.
On the long range plan, we have a full list. It's very long and it tells you all of these terms.
And I think I have it on the cheat sheet that we amended to as well.
It's on the cheat sheet.
Okay.
So, go to the CTAC website. Here in the public reference manual, but there's a cheat sheet as well. This, and then go to, Creative Turks.
There we go.
Is the BMT there?
Well,
I mean, it's pretty common term, so I know.
yes, if not, it's in the LRT.
Yeah, and 0.8 out of 100 or out of 100 million VMTs, I actually worked that out. I was like, okay, how many average, if you assume that 15,000 miles traveled per personal individual, that's actually how it works into about 1 in 9,000. So fatalities a year. So that's not insignificant, but it making it a little bit more clear for this. All right, let's go to the next slide. So also within the study, they actually reviewed some of the crash data to find where kind of the factors to a crash were correlating with them, with different things. So you have a correlation between vehicle speeding and roadway departures. This is for, sorry, KA is fatal crashes and severe injuries. Just so that we have that acronym. So fatal crashes and severe injuries, you know, there's a correlation between speeding and roadway departures, because roadway departures can be often lead to serious crashes, as well as you see speeding and young drivers.
I'm sorry, to clarify, railway department means they leave the road?
They leave the road.
Okay.
So you have, that would be the instances where If they're in a rural area without a shoulder, you might have trees lining the roadway nearby. It might be hitting other structures. It could be overturning accidents after hitting kind of a ditch. So those tend to be, if you're speeding and have that a roadway departure, it tends to be a significant crash. You see speeding with motorcycles, occupant protection as well, so not wearing seatbelts, and impaired driving, alcohol or drug use there as well. So you can see how there's actually traditionally a lot of different factors might slowly kind of play into each other. You can see intersections are having a significant impact because anytime you have vehicles having a point of conflict, you know, crossing each other's paths, you can see that's a major item. Bicycles, pedestrians are very high for intersections because that typically is where they cross vehicular travel. And
so basically, if I'm being rude now, but basically if you are young or aging on a bicycle, walking on a motorcycle, and something, you're dead.
yeah. So well, young
And if you're drunk, goodbye.
Yeah.
There you go.
But this isn't
Walk.
this
If you're
isn't
drunk, young and on a motorcycle, the chances of you not leaving the road at some point is very low.
We didn't need the table for that.
I do have a question on this, sorry.
yes.
The, looking at bicycles,
Mhm.
why is it completely safe horizontally, but you have problems with intersection impair? Why are the numbers different, I guess is my question. So looking at it horizontally,
All right,
I say, like aging user and bicycle. In one tab, it's 7%. The other one, it's
so it should be
0.
I'm trying to remember. Okay, so
is it based on what
It's-
initiates the crash or?
yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
which axis is the initiator?
Yeah, so in this case, I want to say, I'm trying to remember because I remember if you go down, in theory, on the left is the quote unquote driver. And as you work vertically is the other conditions that are factored in.
Okay.
So a motorcycle driver or a motorcycle operator looking across, speeding is the biggest issue, but it's the motorcycle operator traditionally isn't interacting with a lot of pedestrians or bicycles. However, if you go to, let's say, speeding, the individual speeding, when they interact with a motorcycle, it's often an issue.
Yeah, I see. Intersection and bicycle here is 60%, but intersection and bicycle the other way is 1.
They had the little
People on
clarification.
bikes aren't killing people, but a lot of people on bikes are getting killed.
There, yes.
There we go.
Sorry, the clarification is that small little text in the bottom left there that I was trying to read.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I see.
So,
Because your sight test or your vision
It's
test.
really interesting.
Yeah.
so yeah, it kind of says, okay, what factors are attributing to the crashes in this
And-
case?
Just to be clear, sorry for chipping in yet again, just to be clear, this is for our region.
Yes.
This is not
Correct.
for the whole state of Virginia, this is for us.
Do these trends correlate to the rest of Virginia or are there bigger issues in other areas?
They're similar, but our crash rate is lower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would quietly say, if you're going to say, is this for define, I would have to look and see what they consider young. Are they saying under 18, under 21, under 25? I would say maybe in a college town, depending on what they qualify, young might be higher. If you live in an area that has a large number of aging populations like Asheville is my former NPO, aging user challenges were a lot higher because we had a much greater population there, so they would probably flag a little bit more.
Surprised distracted driving is not there. Seeing it, that is different than.
Is that measured?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because I would,
Reaching for something on the floor,
Well,
most likely texting.
yeah, but that's a relatively recent, I mean,
I am-
in terms of data collection, that's a recent phenomenon over the last 10 years.
See,
They probably blame it on something else too.
Well,
They
I
don't
guess
wanna admit.
That leads to the roadway departure, so then it gets dinged.
and if the individual was speeding while operating, it
Yeah.
might be It is somewhat dependent on how whatever the crash report is coded, and there are challenges with those coding that might not always be reflective of what actually happened, but there's enough noise that you can usually pull out the trends such as this that you're fairly confident.
Well, I'm looking at the chart. I mean, it could be hidden and impaired. You know, it doesn't say drunk driving. It doesn't say high driving. You know, there's so many different ways to be impaired these days. So
What age are you an aging user?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have to go back and look at it.
All right.
The
That's a fascinating table.
the full report is actually online, not just giving you the highlights, but on
Yeah.
the FAMPO website, if you go to the TAC agenda for the last meeting, the full report is there. You can read the full report on your own.
And we'll be building this report and some of the findings into our Safe Streets for All project as well. So this will come back in front of you all. Definitely. So, okay, if we go to the next slide, we'll actually, and forgive me, it is kind of a difficult map to read, but the takeaway here is that they actually identify the roads and road segments where some of the more severe, the crashes with fatalities or serious injuries are happening actually at very specific points. As noted, it's 62% of the crashes are on 7% of the roadway segments here. And you do see kind of a trend, and I'll actually break this out to some of my former academic path. But as you can see in Western Spotsylvania, a couple of points kind of in central, kind of working its way to Western Stafford. Some areas that are kind of in that hinterland where Spotsylvania is becoming more and more urban. Down in Caroline County, they're kind of on the fringe of Fredericksburg area as well. You traditionally see a lot of these accidents on areas where you've had a high amount of growth, but you have legacy infrastructure. So the roadways are a little bit older. They're not as modern. They haven't been modernized with most recent crash safety standards. And so you're seeing growth pressures pushing on areas that have older road networks on them. And so you typically can draw circles around urbanized areas and kind of identify that. And that's been a
Yeah, that makes sense, because Brock Road there looks like a death trap in Spotsylvania, and it's got two major subdivisions that are tacked onto it, but you know, it's still a 2-lane country road.
is there a way to see this map more zoomed in? Because I'm actually having trouble orienting. I mean, is it available?
it is available online, and yeah.
And this is through the tech on the TAC agenda?
If you go to the last TAC agenda and you just click on the on this item, you'll get the full report with all these slides.
Can we put the link in the follow-up email for CTAC? Yeah, we always have the good, helpful follow-up email.
And you can always ask me to do it because, yeah, my vision is, I work in small text, so it's okay.
I would like to see, because I don't.
Yeah, some stuff really pops out.
Is that 17 up on the red dots?
So I mean, the key point about these types of maps is that when you see a whole lot of stuff happening in a road like that, that means that that roadway needs some study, and we need to find solutions for that particular roadway, right?
Yeah.
And that's why this leads into the Safe Streets for All program, because we've got federal funding to now design the solution. So this study tells you the problems, all of the problems. And the next study, which we've got the federal funds for, is going to help us find the solutions. And we're hoping you will help be part of that conversation to say, what are the solutions? But here, again, you can see a line of.
I mean, that's just Brock Road.
You see,
That's just Brock Road.
so, for example, these are roads where you can focus specifically on a local area. And this 7 of roadways is where we need to target the improvements just to reduce the injuries, fatalities, and so on.
Huh.
This is Route 3 over here.
Yeah.
Along here. And you can see where that dance is. Yeah, where
Those are probably intersection.
yeah, I would guess that's where.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you're having that up in on Route 17 there as well.
Yeah, I want to know what that intersection is, though. Is that Plantation, maybe?
Oh, I'll just look. It could be Bradford.
Oh, it could be right. Yeah.
Sorry to.
I'll send it on, and you'll be able to zoom in on the map and image.
Plantation? I don't know.
So, Okay, and if anything, King George looks like they're actually doing something fairly well, so.
Yeah, it is plantation, they can see where, Celebrate Virginia Parkway is
Yeah, it's
in relation to it.
yeah, it's a little, celebrates a little bit more to the west of that dot there, so that's why I was
That's
thinking.
why,
Yeah.
I don't think they should extend, the Centerport Parkway to Plantation.
Well, couple it with some intersection improvements.
Yeah.
There's like 15 intersections. Half of them will need traffic lights.
So if we could go to the next slide, I'll give you the quick breakdown of the pedestrian corridors that are having the challenge. And as you would kind of assume that some of the pedestrian safety points or areas such as downtown Fredericksburg, where you do have a large amount of pedestrian activities. But you're starting to see other places like Salem Church Road start highlighting up, where you've had a lot of kind of urban and residential development there that is feeding where you might have limited
Salem Church Road have sidewalks?
I think
A lot of it does. I
fragmented
almost,
stuff, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which in that case, it
I
might
live
have.
down there, so I'm not, but
In that case, it could be either pedestrians crossing not at intersections because the intersections are too spaced out. You could have folks who are pulling into commercial or curb cut areas where you have a pedestrian strike there. I think we could probably dig down a little bit deeper in some of this analysis in the Safe Streets program to actually get better understanding. But it's typically of where you have people out of their vehicles is where you're having it, like Garrisonville Road is showing up as a potential hotspot as well. So it's usually those high volume corridors that start showing up where you have a large amount of people and potentially higher vehicle speeds as well as the traditional downtown pedestrian areas. So, all right.
yeah, Salem Church is pretty bad. Levels Road is pretty good, but Salem Church is pretty bad, actually.
I've only been there a few times, but.
Okay, if we go to the next slide, this is just how this study is being integrated into our Safe Streets for All safety plan. So it's kind of nice that we've actually kind of gotten a head start on a project. That's always kind of good to have a couple of your items kind of already built out and that we can kind of plug and play with a lot work. Because I think with our Safe Streets for All, because we partially completed this, I think for an application, we're able to come in as a lesser amount. So we're awarded with that, it should both save some money as well as expedite the process. So, all right, moving on to the next slide. So also that informational that will come back to this committee will be the CMAQ and STBG allocations. Currently, staff is working to allocate draft funding for these programs. It's the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program, as well as the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. Congestion mitigation goes to congestion mitigation and air quality projects. Surface Transportation Block Grants are very flexible. It can kind of go into almost nearly any transportation-oriented project. So FAMPO has established methodology and competitive process for the jurisdictions to apply for these funds. New this year is the carbon reduction program. This is an IIJA program that allocated a very small amount of funding. It's about $200,000 a year for carbon reduction programs. And these follow a similar trend to the congestion mitigation air quality. They're focused on active transportation, bike ped, alternative fuels. They can be used in some instances for like roadway projects for like ITS, and it's a bit more restrictive capacity as CMAQ funds. But we are solely programming these in. The established methodology suggests that, a specific amount has to go to roadway projects, specific amount has to go to transit projects, like ped active transportation, as well as projects. So all these do have a match that's provided by VDOT, which is nice. And jurisdictions do have a limit of what they can kind of apply. So next slide.
So active transport is bike and pedestrian.
Bike and pedestrian traditionally, yes. And From our competitive process, staff has recommended specific projects for funding. For roadway projects, Spotsylvania applications for the South Point jug handle, as well as the exit 126 partial interchange improvement was selected. And for transit projects, it was a general transit amenities project for Fredericksburg Go. And with the carbon reduction program, kind of adding to the pots, we're able to potentially fund replacement vehicles, new vehicles, and a commuter or feeder bus service in Spotsylvania as well, because we have a slightly larger pot of funding that we can apply this, because carbon reduction is active transportation and transit oriented for the most part. So those were the projects selected. And if you go to the next slide, I can give you. So for the roadway projects, real quick, you have South Point and Route 1 on Spotsylvania is looking to do basically an intersection, kind of a new road segment to direct traffic in specific ways around this area. So it's going to require, it's going to eliminate left turns. And if you need to make a left turn, you basically have to do this right turn movement to facilitate traffic flow, to keep traffic moving on Route 1 faster, as well as keep in mind, like getting back to the safety things that we just saw at intersections, left turns, there's conflict of interest. If you limit left turns, it does provide a safety benefit there. And so that was one of the projects. It's a $31 million project. We're allotting $2.5 million. So this is going to act as seed funding. The other project, the exit 126 interchange. So if you see that section on the right, that's the blue. That was a section that was kind of cut out of a smart scale project. It's just about $4 million. Spotsylvania requested $2.8 million, and they're using local funds to kind of finish off that section. So that was the top two roadway projects competing for funds that were selected. And if you go to...
Can we go back to that real quick? So on the orange part, or maybe it's red, I'm not sure. It's the ramp that comes off of 95 South.
Mm-hmm.
What is happening there right now? Because I see all the clearing of the trees. What is that work?
To my understanding is that exit interchange is that underway right now, or is that a different project that's happening?
They're clearing all the trees off you cut down into a hill basically on the exit ramp, so you've got slope on either side, and they're clearing the trees up there. I didn't know if it was part of, I assume it's this, but I wasn't sure if it was part of something else.
I think it's that, but I just don't know if there's another project going on, because sometimes you have layered projects happening. So, and that basically is an active project that is underway or just now getting underway. So clearing would make sense at this point in time for that project. The trick is all the southern or the left-hand side, the orange, the purple, and the green were funded in proceeding. They just blocked off a small little section to Market Street, and so they had to come back for a separate pot of funds to kind of complete that project. So, okay. For CMAQ and STBG active projects, initially the top scoring project was the Bankside Trail, not train. I keep doing that.
The train.
Yeah, why not? However, that was selected for potential funding in Smart Scale Round 5. So right now, we're fingers crossed that that's going to, the CTB, Commonwealth Transportation Board, is going to sign off and say, yes, great, because what that does is allows us to drop down and pick two other projects. And so one is the Gateway Boulevard Shared Use Path. So this is kind of being combined. I'll get to it in a second. Actually, I shouldn't jump, but the Gateway Boulevard Shared Use Path, as well as a sidewalk segment for US 17. And then for the studies, because we've had about $2 million in rollover funds, as well as the CMAQ funding coming in, earlier in the cycle, we were able to potentially fund studies which don't have as much lead up time earlier in our process. So we've basically, through our rollover, through CMAQ additional funds coming in, even with existing projects requesting more funding and we had to fund them, we can't overfund projects. So we have to find something that is an application that is basically able to start earlier. And so we've actually identified our studies as doing that. We don't have any studies queued up between fiscal year 24 and 27. And traditionally, if you're going to compete with other grant funded things, you probably need to have a study before you can compete with funding. So we're recommending that we go ahead and fund most of the studies that were submitted back in November. So if we go to the next section, I'll talk you through. So in Fredericksburg, the proposed middle school on Gateway Boulevard is going in. They're building a shared use path along that section. They've applied to extend that shared use path basically up to Route 3, kind of it's a gas station. Is it the
Wawa.
Wawa?
Well, and the Royal Farms.
Yeah, Royal Farms. Yeah, right there. Basically, extend that shared use path all the way up and connect to the sidewalk network in that. So you'll basically have a shared use path running the whole length of the southern section of Gateway Boulevard. And then on the right, it's about a 2,400 yard gap in the sidewalk network on Route 17. We're funding this about $600,000 out of I think it's a $3.4 million project to put the sidewalks in here. The high cost for that $3.4 million is because they're also doing access management, consolidating the turns, and that is the expensive part, not necessarily the sidewalk, but in order to put a sidewalk in, you have to consolidate some of those driveways there because they're basically designed.
Where is
decades. It is in between Route 1 and 95.
Okay.
So
Is that like a quarter-mile section?
just about, yeah. Well, this is a little over. No, quarter mile is 2,600 feet, so just under.
Okay.
No, quarter mile is. It's just under a half mile.
Yeah, but it's not going to come down to the Falmouth intersection.
No. So right now, like the western side is actually closer to 95, and with that intersection or interchange improvement, they've extended the sidewalk down, and now this is like connecting it to where the sidewalk actually ends on the eastern side here. So it's basically identifying a gap. And if you look on Google Maps, you will see the goat path that the grass is completely gone where folks are traversing it. So those were the active transportation projects submitted, and so that was the total amount of funding that we've are planning to allocate in this round. And if you have any further questions, I'm going to try to speed this up. I provided the methodology in the new projects and the breakdowns in the upcoming slides. So a lot of the stuff that I already covered, but it kind of gives the breakdown of how we've provided additional funding for Onville Road as requested by staffers, Stafford Borough sidewalks, Garrisonville Road operational study, and so forth. So we'll be coming back. We've brought this to the TAC. The policy committee is going to get the full or the update at the next meeting, and they're going to open public comments. So for the next meeting, you get to come back and tell me everything you like or dislike about the projects. So, all right, if we could skip ahead a couple of slides to the UPWP. Also, that's going in front for public comment or will be open for public comment is the Unified Planning Work Program. This is basically the administrative document that says it directs FAMPO staff to do the work related to FAMPO. So it's a very long document that says, do these items. It's basically our contractor's punch list. So in some cases it is like I use short range planning because that's traditionally a lot of my roles and responsibilities. Maintain the fiscal transportation improvement program. It's basically that punch list, and it's a long document. It will be going out for public comment or once the policy committee approves it. So you'll be coming back to y'all if y'all have any comments on that. So that will become available. And if we go to the next slide for staff reports, if I may jump ahead.
Go ahead,
okay.
Please.
Policy committee updates. Back one, please. So they had basically a workshop to address congestion and land use. It was kind of they had a private consulting facilitator. There we go. I'll get the right word eventually. facilitator to come in and kind of walk them through exercises to kind of link kind of land use decisions and urban form and how that kind of feeds into the congestion issues. But for their formal projects, they approved highway safety targets that we went over today, as well as asset conditions. They approved interim amendments to the CMAC and STB methodology that directed how we were supposed to fund any cost increases. That was kind of left ambiguous in the previous methodology, so they clarified that, as well as they appointed a new bike head at-large member. On the technical advisory committee, next slide. They received the same safety presentation that I provided y'all tonight. They discussed the Garrisonville Road operational study scope change. Right now, how we have it in our documents is that it's an intersection improvement project going from Route 1 to, I'm blanking on the road now.
Garrisonville Road?
Well, it's on, yeah, it's Garrisonville Road, but I'm trying to remember how far west it is. I'm blanking on it now. But with their scope change, they're trying to make it a full multimodal study. So that's going to look at things not beyond just the intersection, but the project is going to shift slightly west in its scope as well. So it's
Maybe all the way to Shelton Shop or something like that.
I think it's further than that.
Even further than that. Okay.
So, I mean, they're moving the boundaries. So that's
I
the
don't
reason
know
why.
if it needs to go that far. I mean, there isn't like there's development went out that way.
I think the original
there's
termination-
development past Shelton Shop
Yeah,
for sure.
I think the original scope had Shelton Shop as the terminal, but they extended it. If I remember
There's
correctly.
nothing zone the density.
So,
I know they opened up that, what was that, like a Walmart neighborhood, one of those neighborhood Walmarts, the little Walmart.
and with this, they've also come back to, yeah.
To meet someone in the parking lot, not go in.
Not to shop.
No, not.
Yeah. But with this scope change,
Walmart Market.
Right.
okay.
Yes.
With the scope change, they've also come back during the CMAC STBG process and requested more funding, so they're kind of aligning what they're trying to need to do. They saw the CMAC STBG congestion reduction carbon reduction program draft allocations, as well as we were receiving feedback from the staff perspective of, okay, where do we need to kind of fiddle, because unfortunately I had to throw out numbers somewhere, and then we kind of sit down and hammer out the details. And finally, on their actions, they endorsed public comment, endorsed to the PC for the FY 24-27 TIP, endorsed to the policy committee for CMAC, STBG, and CRP. Overall allocations, not necessarily the fiscal year requirements, but the general amounts they've said that, as well as the FAMPO UPWP. So we've kind of mirrored their meetings for the most part.
Right.
So, and that ends the staff report.
Okay, great. All right, so we've gone through number 7. We're on to number 8. It's the VDOT reporter problem issues and progress update. Did you have anything that you wanted to present on that, or? Okay. I am curious, are they aware now about the issues that we brought up about the signage, specifically with the business routes? Okay.
Particular and what is sanctions to let. We know that he is actively working with Fredericksburg.
Okay.
In particular, but taking all of the comments.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I also want to express my appreciation to VDOT for filling the pothole on Weymouth and Chalkman.
I did that the other night.
Now we know why you talk to my tires especially.
That'd be resurfacing that road. So, Hello Mill.
Anything else on 8A? All right, for 8B, I do know that we have Rupert's comment from earlier. Can we read Rupert's comment?
Yes. Regarding the safety targets portion of that y'all just heard, I'm sorry I won't be there. This is Rupert. To note the glaring omission of any consideration of the most effective safety solution, pedestrian-oriented communities. The safest trips are by foot and transit, but this presentation shows no effort by VDOT or FAMPO to focus on policies that either encourage walkable developments or discourage the suburban sprawl inducing system that is at the root of most transportation fatalities. To illustrate their disregard for that course of action, their presentation's crosstab analysis grid doesn't even have a space for public transit.
From Rupert. Go ahead,
I'd like
please.
to say something. I made a presentation on the interconnector trail network and proposed Cannon Ridge Golf Course Park at the Stafford Parks Advisory meeting. And they invited me back, so I'm making a presentation on the 20th, if anybody wants to go at 7 o'clock at the Courthouse Community Center.
Okay. Does anybody else have a member report or anything else?
This is Dave McLaughlin.
Go ahead, Dave.
It goes back to the policy committee briefing. In this body in the past, we have talked about the linkages between land use and transportation. I didn't watch the policy committee meeting, so I don't know how it went, but would this body get something out of that, a summary of that presentation or a discussion or something, key points that came out of it? I'm asking a question. I can't propose, or I can't be the proponent one way or the other because I haven't seen it.
That's a great question, Dave. On the policy committee webpage, you can view the minutes from the most recent, from that meeting. That could potentially help you.
And also the slides of the presenter, I believe, are available. Am I right?
I don't believe we made the slides available, but there's the video recording. If you
not send the slides out with the agenda of the policy committee meeting.
they weren't his complete slides, so it was just like a preview.
Oh, that's correct.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, I would suggest that when John sends out whatever it is he's going to send out after this meeting, that you send a copy of the slides that were presented at the policy committee meeting, which we now, I believe, have a copy of at the office, so that at least your members, including Dave, could have a look through the slides. You can also watch the video online, and I'm sure John can provide you any additional materials you with, or the minutes, as Foley suggested, will reflect some of the discussion. We did unusual minutes this time for the policy committee. We literally, the bullet points of the discussion of the policy committee members at the end of the meeting, we literally wrote down what was said. So we didn't put their name next to each comment, but the comments that were made by the policy committee are actually in the minutes.
All right.
So if you look at the minutes, the slide presentation, which John can send you, and then the video online, you could get that information. And if you want more, you could put it on your agenda for your next meeting, and then we'll happily provide whatever else you need for a discussion if you would like to have a discussion.
Dave, is that something that you would want to discuss in the subsequent meeting?
Well, I think Ian's probably right. So I'll look at the presentation, the policy committee video, follow along, and then see if there's enough in it that it would be worth it. And then I'll get back to you, Matt, and say, hey, you might consider putting this on the agenda, because agendas get pretty crowded sometimes. So it's one of those things. But till I look at it, I guess I can't make a good recommendation, but I'll do that.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, just get back to us, and then we could just provide this in our follow-up. Any other members that want to?
I just have a question on the river crossing. I saw you had it on there as a study. So did FAMPO actually approve a study for it?
Say that again.
I saw on your presentation earlier, there's a river crossing study.
Yes.
But is FAMPO gonna approve a study for it, or what's going on?
So we've been doing the internal staff-led study of a potential river crossing, which we're going to present. There's a public comment opportunity do that. The May policy committee meeting, we booked the VDOT conference center because it's larger than this venue. So people want to come to that and we're going to present that. Sorry?
The Deacon Road. Deacon.
It's on Deacon Road.
86 Beacon Road.
At the VDOT.
The one with the green roof, or is it up in the main building with where Kyle is?
It is in the green room, the auditorium. In the next monthly email that we'll send out with all of our meetings, which will go out later this month on the last Thursday of the month, it'll have the address for that policy committee meeting.
That'll be something open to public comment.
Yes. And then we have potentially put in the budget a request for funding to fund the final study if the policy committee decides that they wish to proceed with a river crossing. What you have to do is a NEPA study and an engineering study because you've got to define the final alignment of a potential bridge and roadway connection. You've got to then get a formal public comment process, which is driven by NEPA requirements. And you also have to look at the environmental impacts and any negative impacts. You've got to suggest measures to alleviate those impacts. So there's a requirement if you want to proceed with such a big project to have an additional study. We've requested funding for that additional study, but we won't know until at the earliest the May policy meeting whether the policy committee would like to approve that funding.
Okay, so
We don't know yet if we have the funding, and we will only know that in May.
okay, and how many potential crossings are there going to be presented?
So we have got in our study group about 5 options that we've been looking at. And I don't want to say more than that because I don't like to discuss things that the policy committee hasn't seen yet.
Okay.
So the policy committee is going to see the first slides to see what staff have been working on Monday night. And you're welcome to look at those slides, and then the full report of this first phase of the study will be available for the May policy committee.
Okay.
Also going to share it with the CTAC and all that, so you'll get it. It's just I'm not to hijack the policy committee members by telling the public things that they haven't seen at all, because then they have to answer questions and field comments and all that, and they don't know what the facts are yet. So I don't like to ambush them.
Well, I just want to make sure there's more options out there, so it'll be compared.
So there are multiple options, yes.
But I would also like to make sure that there is movement. Because after, we experienced traffic today, that's paralytic to we need a problem that's been a problem for a long time. I've talked to people in policy making situations and not gotten positive responses. So, my hope, and I'm sure there's other people here, is that we can move on that. That there will be movement on that. Obviously, it's not our role.
John and I and representatives of the staff of the jurisdictions have just spent 6 months of our life trying to find a solution. Whether or not we found the right solution is still a matter that other people will decide. But we've really been trying, and we will present those results over the next 2 policy committee meetings. I encourage you to attend, especially at the May one. You may wish to speak in the May meeting yourself and say, hey, I like option 3 and please build it quickly and whatever you want to say. So please do. Those are all public meetings, and every one of our committees is a public meeting. So you feel free to make those comments directly to the people who can make the decision. We as staff make no decisions. We only provide data and sometimes recommendations, but the politicians make those decisions. We don't.
So next policy meeting is time to come up.
So the first one, we're just giving a preview to the committee on Monday of what's coming in the report. The full report will be available for the May policy committee meeting, and we've booked a special venue because we anticipate members of the public are going to want to come, and some wanting to say don't do it and others saying you need it yesterday or whatever. So because of that interest, public interest, we booked a special venue. Sorry, the date on that is May the 15th. Okay. At Deacon Road in Stafford, Southern Stafford.
Thank you. I'm just looking real quick. So there's not going to be a policy committee meeting on May the 15th because that is the third Monday.
There is, that's the one at Deacon Road.
Oh, it's all the same. It's the policy committee
The
and
regular policy committee meeting.
Got it.
Must be held at the venue
Yeah.
to VDOT Center. And we've specifically allocated
I missed
time
that, sorry.
on the agenda for this specific item because we know there's a lot of interest.
Okay, gotcha. It's one and the same.
When you come in through the entrance, just keep to the right, just keep turning right. The building has a green metal roof on it, so you can always look at that. It's easily visible from Deacon.
All right, thank you. Okay, final public comment. Comments and questions from the members of the public are welcome at this time. Any members of the public here that want to make any comments? Any members that joined online that want to make any comments? Hearing none, we'll call that closed. Future agenda items?
I was gonna ask for anything today, like that matrix or questions you might have for VDOT where I didn't have the immediate answer. Please feel free to just send it, follow up with an email so that I can respond.
For a long term.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, great. With that, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Did the second? Everybody say aye.
All right.
Okay,
Bye.
Aye.
see you next month.
Hey, can I get your, or an email?
Well, my email's available should be available on the website, right?
Sorry.